All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're talking about a huge idea in education, something called Bloom's taxonomy. It's a framework that has, for well over half a century, completely shaped how we think about learning itself.
So, think about this for a second. We've all been there, right? Cramming for a test, just hammering dates, names, formulas into our brains. But is being able to spit that information back out the same thing as actually learning it? That very question is the whole reason Bloom's taxonomy even exists. You have to go back to the 1950s. A group of educational psychologists, with Benjamin Bloom leading the charge, noticed something was off. They felt that schools were way too focused on the lowest gear of thinking, just remembering stuff. Students were getting really good at being parrots, but they weren't necessarily becoming thinkers. So Bloom and his team came up with a pretty elegant solution. They created a classification system, a taxonomy, that organizes the different levels of thinking. You should picture it like a pyramid, starting with the simplest, most basic skills at the bottom and building up to the most complex at the very top. And here's the most important part. The whole point was for it to be a tool. A tool for teachers, sure, so they could design better lessons, but also a tool for us as learners to push ourselves, to get past just memorizing and start climbing towards those more sophisticated ways of thinking, what we call higher order thinking.
And this idea didn't just sit on a shelf, it evolved. In 2001, one of Bloom's own students, Lauren Anderson, led a team to update it. They made some really key changes, which we're going to focus on today, that made it even more powerful and adaptable, first for the digital age, and now for the age of AI.
So let's actually climb this ladder of learning. We're going to start at the bottom with the first 3 rungs of the revised taxonomy. These are the foundational skills that everything else is built on. These first 3 levels, remember, understand, and apply, are what people often call the lower order thinking skills. But listen, don't let that name fool you. They are absolutely critical. You can't even think about building the top of the pyramid if you don't have a rock-solid foundation. Okay, first up, remembering. This is the bedrock. It's as simple as it sounds, recalling facts, listing things, reciting rules you've learned. It is the essential first step. You gotta have the info before you can do anything with it.
Next, we move up to understanding. This is a big leap from just remembering. It's about actually grasping the meaning. Can you explain a concept in your own words? If you can paraphrase an idea or summarize it for someone else, that's when you know you truly understand it.
The third level, applying, is where the rubber really meets the road. This is where you take the knowledge you have, the stuff you understand, and you actually use it to solve a problem. You know, like taking the company rule book and using it to figure out an employee's vacation days. That's applying.
Okay, so our foundation is built. Now for the exciting part. Let's climb to the top half of the pyramid and explore the skills that really define what it means to be a critical and creative thinker.
These next 3 levels are analyze, evaluate, and create. These are the higher order thinking skills. This is the zone where you stop being just a consumer of information and you start becoming a critical user and eventually a producer of new ideas.
So level 4 is analyzing. Think of it like being a detective. You're breaking down information into its component parts to see how they relate to each other. When you troubleshoot a broken machine, you're analyzing. You have to compare what's happening versus what should be happening to find the problem. Next up, evaluating. Now, this isn't just about giving your opinion. It's about making a judgment based on specific criteria or standards. It's when you can look at several options, pick the best one, and then defend your choice with solid reason. And this brings us to what is maybe the most fascinating shift between the original 1956 model and the 2001 update. They completely rethought what the very peak of human thinking actually is.
See, in the original pyramid, evaluation, making those informed judgments, was seen as the absolute highest skill. But the revised model actually swapped the top 2 levels. Now creating is at the pinnacle. This change really reflects our modern focus on innovation, on design, on actually producing something new.
Which brings us to the very top, creating. This is where you pull together everything from all the other levels, remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating,
to generate something that's original and new. Whether you're designing a machine or composing a piece of music, creating is the ultimate synthesis of knowledge.
So you might be thinking, okay, a framework from the 50s updated in 2001, is it really relevant in our world of constant tweets and notifications? The answer, it turns out, is a huge yes. In fact, people have adapted it into something called Bloom's digital taxonomy. Just look at how neatly our modern tools fit. You can use a tool like MindMeister to create a mind map. You're analyzing info visually. You can use something like Flipgrid to post video critiques of an article. You're evaluating. And you can fire up Podomatic to publish a brand new podcast. You're creating something original. The tools change, but the thinking processes, they're exactly the same. Now, even though it's used everywhere, the taxonomy isn't perfect. No model is. And like any really big idea, it's been picked apart and questioned over the years. Is this pyramid really the last word on how we learn? Well, critics have some good points. They argue that learning isn't always this neat, clean, step-by-step process. I mean, sometimes learning is messy, right? You might have a creative spark before you fully analyzed all the details. Others say it kind of simplifies the beautiful complexity of human thought and doesn't really factor in things like our emotions or social situations, which are, huge parts of learning. But here's why it has stuck around. It's so durable because it's meant to be a flexible guide, not a set of rigid, unbreakable laws. I love this quote from Dr. Med Karbach, who says, "It was designed to capture the deep, timeless processes of learning, and that's its real power. It gives all of us a shared language and a map to think about, thinking." And that brings us to one last pretty wild question for today. The taxonomy put creating at the very top. But now we have AI that can create stunning images, write essays, and code entire programs in seconds. So as artificial intelligence gets better and better at the very act of creating, what does that mean for us? What becomes the new peak of human thinking? That is something for all of us to think about.